Hello and welcome to Mangum News. I'm your host, Elijah Mangum. This week we'll be discussing Alec Baldwin being charged in the Rust shooting, the murder trial of a Quitman County couple, Mississippi House voting to ban gender transition surgery for minors, the March for Life, an officer-involved shooting in Clinton, my weekly weather report, and my exclusive interview with Mississippi State Auditor Shad. Without further ado, let's begin. Oscar-nominated actor Alec Baldwin will be charged in the fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyne Hutchins on the set of Rust in October of 2021. He and armorer Hannah Gutierrez were both charged with involuntary manslaughter. Baldwin argued his dependence on the professionals who assured him that the gun wasn't loaded was enough to escape prosecution. However, Hutchins' family and lawyers argued that this was a clear case of manslaughter. The Regulate Experimental Adolescent Procedures Act was passed by the Mississippi House of Representatives on Thursday. Quentin Smith of WLBT has the story.
You favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay.
With the push of a button,
Has everyone voted?
state representatives cast their votes.
By a vote of 78 yeas and 28 nays, the bill passes.
Lawmakers now moving one step closer towards making House Bill 1125 law. It's the Regulate Experimental Adolescent Procedures Act.
What this is attempting to do is anyone under the age of 18 who is transgendered and wants to go through a procedure or through the therapy, they have to be 18 before they can do that.
Not only does this bill prevent doctors from performing these procedures, it also stops them from prescribing hormone medications to anyone under the age of 18.
A medical doctor's license can be revoked if they perform these procedures.
District 2 State Representative Nick Bain presented the bill to members of the House.
Public funds cannot be used to aid in these procedures.
However, Bain and this bill received pushback, with some lawmakers saying this is not an issue because surgeries like these have not been performed in the state.
Wouldn't we be much better off dealing with bills that would help our closing hospitals across the state?
We're not giving Medicaid the ability to pay for these type of surgeries. That makes more money, more Medicaid dollars available for those hospitals.
Are there enough of these procedures that are endangering the lives of children under the age of 18?
No. There's a growing cohort, if you will, of kids who are detransitioning. So for me, it's about those children and making sure we take a wait-and-see approach.
Now, the ACLU sent a statement not long after this bill was passed, saying in part, gender-affirming care will look different for every transgender person, making it all the more critical for these decisions to be between patients, their families, and their doctors, not politicians forcing policy onto these vulnerable young people. Now, this bill will now go over to the Senate, where lawmakers there will vote on this legislation. Quentin Smith, 3 on your side.
On Thursday, the 50th annual March for Life was held in Washington, D.C. by pro-life activists across the nation. This is the first march since the overturning of Roe v. Wade last summer. Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch argued the case and spoke at the march.
We can protect life, but this is not the end of our journey. Until we can give women, when they are most vulnerable, what they need and that their children need to thrive, and until we can make changes in our laws that reflect our compassion for all life. And until we can change hearts and minds in our fellow Americans, until then, life remains fragile and the embrace of human dignity remains aspirational. So it is our charge today, in this new Dobbs era, to channel that same determination and hope and prayer that has led you to these streets for 50 years.
Vice President Kamala Harris commemorated the 50th anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision by imploring Americans to work to enshrine abortion into law.
I'm pleased to announce that President Biden, I'm announcing it today, has issued a presidential memorandum on this issue. Members of our cabinet and our administration are now directed, as of the president's order, to identify barriers to access to prescription medication and to recommend actions to make sure that doctors can legally prescribe, that pharmacies can dispense, and that women can secure safe and effective medication.
Two suspects were convicted of double murder of a couple in Quitman County on Friday. Keith Coleman Jr. and Jamie Lynn Tubbs were sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Will Polk and April Jones in 2019, charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of discretion of a corpse.
So I just want to appreciate the hard work of the deputies within the Quitman County Sheriff Department, as well as those officers within the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. This would not have happened without a combined effort. So I think that this gave the family some comfort today, and we're going to continue to try to find those remains, April and Will, and hopefully we can find some kind of closure at the end of this. So I appreciate all the people that's involved.
The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation is investigating an officer-involved shooting in Clinton that occurred on Sunday. The shooting took place at the Pine Trail Townhouses complex on Spring Ridge Road. According to Captain Josh Frazier, police got a call about a suspicious person sitting in a car wearing a ski mask. An officer responded and approached the man, who fled on foot. The officer initiated a foot chase and at one point used a taser on the suspect. The suspect's jacket caused the taser to be ineffective in subduing the suspect. The suspect pulled a gun on the officer, who then fired shots, fatally wounding the suspect. The officer was not injured. Tuesday has been issued as an alert day by WLBT due to the chance of heavy rain, strong winds, and flash flooding coming in the afternoon. Wednesday through Saturday will be clear, with temperatures ranging from 30 degrees to 62 degrees, while Sunday will have a 60% chance of rain. Can you kind of give us a little bit of explaining, the ongoing welfare scandal and your office's involvement in that?
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit of history, I guess, on that case. Back in 2019, we opened an investigation into what at the time was alleged to be a pretty simple kickback scheme involving the head of DHS, John Davis, and a vendor named Brett DiBiase. So with that tip, our investigators in the auditor's office dug in. We started looking. Several months later, 6 or 7 months later, the DA here in Hinds County took what we had found and used it to indict 6 individuals. Today, 5 of those folks have pled guilty. The 5 main players have pled guilty in that round of indictments. And then a couple of months after they were indicted, the auditors in my office released a much more exhaustive version of the story of what happened to welfare money here in Mississippi. And if you look at that audit and add up the other auditing work that we have done over the course of the last few years, what you see is tens of millions of dollars of welfare funds that have been misspent. I think based on what you're seeing now, you'd say at least $77 million have been misspent, but more likely, based on the evidence we have, it's probably a little bit north of $100 million of welfare money that had been misspent during that time. So really shortly after those first indictments and that audit work that we did, we started working very closely with federal authorities. So now federal investigators have our entire evidence file. They have access to everything that we have seen. Federal prosecutors have access to everything we've seen. They've got copies of everything that we have. And so really in the last 2 years, they have led the process where they're digging in and they're trying to make decisions about whether or not they want to try to recoup any money on behalf of the federal government, or do they want to charge any additional people with a crime? And we're sort of in an assisting role at this point. We answer questions that they have about the evidence file. We've assigned people to help work with them. So really, that's sort of where we are in the case right now. And as you noted, Elijah, it's gotten a ton of attention, not just because of the large dollar amount, but because of some of the people involved. Really, our bottom line at the end of the day in the auditor's office is treat everybody the same and hold them to the same standard. And that standard is very simple. It's the law. We dig up the facts, we present those facts to prosecutors, and then we ask that the prosecutors hold everyone to the same exact standard as they make their decisions about what they want to do.
Yeah, and more broadly, this is just one case that got a lot of attention from the state auditor's office in particular, but can you kind of describe the role day to day that the state auditor plays in our state government?
Absolutely. So the big picture mission of the auditor's office is to make sure that your money, taxpayer funds, are spent in the way that the law requires. And we do that mainly through doing routine audits. So we do routine audits of state agencies. We'll go into many agencies once a year, some every few years. We do routine audits of county governments. We audit somewhere between 25 and 30 counties every single year. We do routine audits of school districts. And by doing those routine audits, we give the taxpayers visibility into how their money is being spent. So that's big thing number one that we do to meet our mission. Big thing number two is we do investigations. So if we're doing an audit at a state agency, or if we get a whistleblower tip from someone and they say, hey, I've seen evidence that mayor has stolen a bunch of money from my town, we will launch a criminal investigation to see if we can identify the facts and see if what they're saying is true. And to do that, we have investigators. They're men and women who have been to the police academy. They're trained to do complex white collar investigations. Attorneys, we have a CPA in that division, and they dig in, they dig up the facts. If we see that there is indeed some evidence of a criminal act, we'll take that over to a prosecutor, and then the prosecutor will make their decision about whether or not they want to charge that individual with a crime. So day to day, those are the two big things that we're doing to make sure that your taxpayer money is protected.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about you is not only are you the state auditor, but you also serve in the military. Can you describe sort of what you do, what your role is in the military, as well as how you balance that as your role as state auditor?
It's a tough balance because my time is stretched very thin, as you can imagine. So my military service is in the National Guard. That means at minimum, I go away 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. So you can imagine at the end of a long work week in the auditor's office, there are weekends when I have to go eat dinner with my family on Friday night and then wake up at the crack of dawn Saturday morning before the sun comes out, actually, and get in my truck and drive to a military base and do a weekend's worth of duty there. On top of that, you're always eligible to be deployed. And so I may be called on to go do a deployment to answer to a natural disaster or to go overseas. And then there's constant training requirements too. So sometimes you get called away to go to a base in Alabama or Virginia or somewhere else where you have to update your training as a military officer to be able to do your job effectively. I love doing it because it's another way for me to serve. Both my grandfathers were veterans, and that's been a family tradition among a lot of men in my family. And so I wanted to keep that family tradition alive. I love the idea of service. It's why I love being state auditor. And it's really a lesson that I want to pass down to my kids. But you're absolutely right that it presents a strain. And really the thing that I always tell folks when they ask that kind of a question is an important thing to keep in mind is that the families of military service members actually often bear the bigger brunt of military service than do the actual members. So you can imagine when I go away for a weekend or 2 weeks, or if I have to go away for a training, my wife is at home with 2 kids. We're about to have our third kid in February. So she's got to make all of that household functioning go. And it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge on her and a challenge on me to be able to keep up with everything. But I love doing it because it gives me another way to serve.
That's all we have for this week. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see y'all on Sunday.